Welcome back to Wild HOA Situations. The group chat loved her story until the proof dropped. Stephanie Kessler marched up my driveway at 7 in the morning with a portable printer, screaming that she could print an accusation faster than I could defend myself. "I need your payment," she shouted, waving a sheet of paper that was still warm from the machine strapped to her shoulder. The printer was one of those battery-powered thermal units, the kind you see at trade shows, and she had it loaded with pre-formatted violation notices. She slammed the page against my screen door hard enough to rattle the frame and told me the Harbor Point Residential Association had already filed a theft report with my name on it. I live in Kansas City, Missouri, in a planned community with a central clubhouse and constant enforcement patrols, and Stephanie Kessler was the gate access coordinator, which meant she controlled who came and went, who got towed, and who got reported. The accusation was simple. A neighbor's car had been rummaged through overnight, and Stephanie claimed she saw my silhouette near the vehicle around 2 in the morning. I work as a data analyst, which means I spend most of my time looking at spreadsheets and cleaning messy data sets, not prowling parking lots at 2 in the morning. I told Stephanie I was asleep at that hour and had no idea what she was talking about. She ignored me completely and printed a second notice right there on my porch, the little machine whirring and spitting out another thermal sheet with the Harbor Point logo at the top. She said the accusation was official now because she had submitted everything to the management company and copied my employer. That last part made my stomach drop. I asked her what employer, and she smiled and said she already had my LinkedIn profile pulled up on her phone. She claimed she sent a formal complaint to my company's HR department alleging I was running a side business from my home and using stolen tools to do it. I had no side business. I had no stolen tools. The only thing in my garage was a broken lawnmower and some boxes I had not unpacked yet. Stephanie said that did not matter because the victim, a neighbor 2 streets over, reported a missing toolkit case, and my porch camera supposedly proved I was outside at the time of the theft. I pointed out that my porch camera faces my own door, not the street, and definitely not someone else's car 2 streets away. She said that was exactly what a guilty person would say and that the footage was being reviewed by the board. I asked who was on the board. She said she was the board, at least for gate and access enforcement, and that was all that mattered. Then she set the bright orange cone down on my porch step like she owned the sidewalk, and told me I had 72 hours to pay a $1,500 violation fee, or my gate access and parking rights would be suspended. I asked to see the complaint. Stephanie handed me 2 sheets of paper, both printed on the same flimsy thermal stock, and both formatted identically. One was labeled as the original complaint filed by the neighbor. The other was labeled as the follow-up escalation filed by Stephanie herself. I held them side by side and noticed they had the exact same template, the same spacing, and even the same typo in the header where the HOA name was missing a letter. I pointed this out. Stephanie snatched both sheets back and said I was not allowed to examine official documents without a formal records request. She said the records request process took 30 days and cost $50. And by then my gate fob would be deactivated anyway. She told me I was lucky she was not harsher, and then she walked back to her car, packed up the printer, and drove off. I stood there for a minute trying to process what had just happened. The whole encounter felt like a fever dream. I went inside, made coffee, and started Googling Stephanie Kessler and the Harbor Point Residential Association. What I found was not comforting. The HOA had a reputation for aggressive enforcement, mostly targeting anyone who pushed back on fees or questioned the budget. Stephanie had been gate coordinator for 3 years and had a habit of showing up at people's houses with printed notices, sometimes multiple notices in a single day. There were forum posts from other residents complaining that she invented violations, backdated complaints, and used the gate system to track who was home and when. One person claimed she tried to get them trespassed from the management office waiting area after they asked for a receipt. Another said she confiscated paperwork during a lobby meeting and called it procedure. I called the management company. The receptionist, a woman named Diane who had been working the front desk for years, answered and immediately sighed when I said Stephanie's name. She told me Stephanie had already submitted a complaint that morning and that the board would review it at the next meeting, which was not for another 2 weeks. I asked if I could see the complaint. Diane said she could not share it without board approval, but she could confirm that it included a theft allegation, a gate access suspension request, and a recommendation that I be reported to local law enforcement. I asked if there was any evidence attached. Diane paused and said there was a photo, but it was grainy and she could not make out much detail. She also said Stephanie had submitted a second complaint an hour ago claiming I was hostile during the Porch interaction and had threatened her. That was a complete lie, but Diane said she had to log it anyway. I thanked Diane and hung up. Then I pulled up my Porch camera footage. The camera records continuously and stores a week of clips in the cloud. I scrubbed back to 2 a.m. and watched the entire hour from 1:45 to 2:45. I was not on camera once. My car was parked in the driveway the whole time, and the only person who walked past my house was someone in a gray bucket hat carrying a shopping bag. The figure moved quickly, stayed in the shadows, and kept their head down, but the build and the gate looked familiar. I zoomed in as much as the resolution allowed and saw a blue blazer under the hat. Stephanie wore a blue blazer every single day. I saved the clip and made a backup. I decided to check the gate logs. Harbor Point uses an electronic fob system, and every time someone enters or exits through the main gate, the system logs the fob number, the time, and the direction. I did not have direct access to the logs, but I remembered that the HOA posts a monthly summary in the clubhouse for transparency. I drove over to the clubhouse and found the summary pinned to the bulletin board. It was a printout with no readable text, just a grid of numbers and codes, but I took a photo of it anyway. Then I asked the front desk attendant if I could get a copy of the full log for the night in question. The attendant said I needed board approval for that, but she could print the summary for me if I wanted. I said yes, and she handed me a sheet. Back at home, I compared the summary to the timeline. My fob had not been used at all between midnight and 6 a.m. Stephanie's fob, however, showed 3 separate exits and entries between 1:50 and 3:30. The first exit was at 1:52, which lined up almost perfectly with the shadowy figure on my Porch camera. The second exit was at 2:38, and the third was at 3:12. I did not know what she was doing during those trips, but the pattern was suspicious. I added the log printout to my evidence folder and started drafting a formal rebuttal to submit to the management company. Before I could finish, Stephanie showed up again. This time she had a contractor with her, a guy in a work vest who looked uncomfortable. She knocked on my door and said the contractor needed to confirm that I had stolen supplies from a recent clubhouse renovation project. I asked what supplies. She said a toolkit case, paint rollers, and a box of cabinet hardware. The contractor looked at me and said he had not reported anything missing. Stephanie cut him off and said she was filing the report on his behalf because he was too busy to deal with it. The contractor shook his head and said that was not true. Stephanie glared at him and said if he did not back her up, she would make sure his company lost the HOA contract. The contractor looked at me, then back at Stephanie and said he was not going to lie. He told me he had no idea why she brought him here and that he had never met me before. Then he walked back to his truck and drove off. Stephanie stood there for a moment, face red, and then she said the contractor was clearly in on it with me and that she would be adding him to the complaint. She said the management company would be sending someone to inspect my garage within the week and that I was not allowed to move or hide anything before then. I asked if she had a warrant. She said she did not need a warrant because the HOA bylaws gave her the authority to inspect any unit for code violations. I told her that was not how the law worked. She said I would find out soon enough and walked back to her car. I called Diane again. She sounded exhausted. She said Stephanie had just emailed her demanding an emergency inspection of my garage and threatening to file a formal complaint against the management company if they did not comply. Diane said the company was not going to honor the request because it was legally questionable, but she warned me that Stephanie would keep escalating. She also said Stephanie had started sending certified letters to my address, sometimes 3 or 4 a day, in an attempt to flood my mailbox and overwhelm me. Diane said she had seen this tactic before and that it usually worked because residents gave up and just paid the fines to make it stop. I asked Diane if she could help me. She said she could not do much officially, but she could quietly print the correct complaint form template for me so I could see how it was supposed to look. She told me to come by the office after hours and she would leave it at the front desk. I thanked her and said I would be there that evening. Diane said to be careful because Stephanie had been known to sit in the parking lot and watch who came and went. She also said Stephanie had installed a Ring camera on the clubhouse door without board approval and was using it to track residents who filed complaints. That evening, I drove to the management office. The parking lot was empty except for Diane's car and one other vehicle I did not recognize. I went inside and found the envelope Diane had left for me at the front desk. Inside was a blank complaint form template. I compared it to the 2 sheets Stephanie had given me that morning, and they were completely different. The real template had a watermark, a signature line at the bottom, and a section for witness information. Stephanie's version had none of that. It looked like she had created her own template in Microsoft Word and printed it on thermal paper to make it look official. I took photos of both forms side by side and added them to my evidence folder. As I was leaving, I saw headlights pull into the parking lot. It was Stephanie. She got out of her car holding her battery-powered printer and a clipboard and walked straight toward the office door. I ducked back inside and locked the door behind me. Stephanie tried the handle and then started knocking. She said she knew I was in there and that I was trespassing because the office was closed. I told her through the door that I had permission to be there. She said that did not matter because she was revoking my access effective immediately. She said she was calling the police to have me removed and that I would be charged with trespassing on HOA property. I called Diane. She did not pick up, but she texted me a minute later saying she saw the whole thing on the office security camera and that she was forwarding the footage to the management company's legal team. She also said Stephanie did not have the authority to revoke anyone's access to the office and that she was way out of line. I stayed inside until Stephanie got tired of knocking and left. Then I went home and started drafting a formal records request for all complaints filed under my name, all gate logs for the past 6 months, and all communications between Stephanie and the management company. The next day, Stephanie showed up at my house again, this time with a deputy. She told the deputy I had been harassing her, following her around the neighborhood, and threatening her in the management office lobby. The deputy asked me if any of that was true. I said no and offered to show him my porch camera footage. He said that would not be necessary, and that he was just there to document the call. He asked Stephanie if she had any evidence of harassment. She said she had a voicemail I left her threatening legal action. The deputy asked to hear it. She played the voicemail on speaker. It was me, but all I said was that I was filing a formal complaint with the management company and requesting copies of all documentation related to the theft accusation. There was no threat, no profanity, nothing even remotely hostile. The deputy looked at Stephanie and said that was not harassment. He said if she wanted to file a report, she could, but it was not going to go anywhere. Stephanie insisted he write it down anyway. The deputy pulled out a notepad and started writing. Stephanie kept talking, filling in details that were not in the voicemail, claiming I had used aggressive language and implied I was going to take legal action against her personally. The deputy wrote it all down without comment. When he was done, he handed her a card with an incident number and told her to contact the department if she had any actual evidence. Then he left. Stephanie turned to me and said I had just made everything worse. She said the incident report was now part of the official record, and that the HOA board would use it as grounds to suspend my gate access permanently. She said the lien process started this week unless I paid immediately, and that once the lien was filed, my credit would be destroyed and I would never be able to sell my house. I asked her how a $1,500 violation fee could justify a lien. She said it was not just the fee anymore. She said I now owed late penalties, administrative costs, legal review fees, and inspection charges, and the total was over $4,000. I asked for an itemized statement. She said it was being mailed to me and that I had 72 hours from the postmark date to pay in full. I went inside and called an attorney. The attorney said HOA liens were real and enforceable, but they required a formal hearing and a board vote. He said if Stephanie was threatening a lien without following proper procedure, that was a violation of state law. He also said the fact that she was stacking fees without documentation was a red flag, and that I should file a complaint with the state HOA oversight board. He offered to send a cease and desist letter on my behalf for $500. I said yes and gave him all the details I had so far. He said he would have the letter out by the end of the day and that it would buy me some time to gather more evidence. That afternoon, I got a text from a neighbor named Marcus. He said he had been recording when Stephanie started yelling at me on my porch the first time and that he caught the whole thing on his phone. He said he did not know what was going on, but it looked bad and he wanted to make sure I had a copy. I drove over to his house and he showed me the clip. It was perfect. It showed Stephanie printing the violation notice, setting the cone down, and threatening to report me to my employer. It also showed her admitting that she had already submitted complaints to multiple parties without any evidence. Marcus said he would testify if it came to that. I thanked him and made a backup of the clip. The next morning, I got a call from Diane. She said Stephanie had shown up at the management office demanding that the staff print a notice accusing me of theft while other residents were in the waiting area. Diane said Stephanie made a huge scene, slamming her hands on the counter and insisting the notice be printed immediately so everyone could see it. Diane said the office manager finally told Stephanie to leave and that if she came back without an appointment, they would call the police. Stephanie did not leave. Instead, she tried to go behind the counter and access the printer herself. The office manager blocked her and told her she was not allowed in the staff area. Stephanie said she had the authority to access any HOA documents and that the staff was obstructing official business. The office manager said that was not how it worked and escorted her out of the building. Diane said the whole thing was on the office security camera and that the footage was being reviewed by the management company's legal team. She also said 2 other residents who were in the waiting area had filed complaints about Stephanie's behavior, and that the board was finally starting to take the situation seriously. Diane said she was supposed to stay neutral, but she wanted me to know that Stephanie had been pulling this kind of thing for months, and that other residents had been too scared to push back. She said I was not the first person Stephanie had accused of theft, and that there was a pattern of missing items followed by accusations that never went anywhere. I asked Diane if she knew what happened to the other cases. She said most people just paid the fines to make it stop. One person tried to fight it and ended up in a hearing where Stephanie claimed she had submitted evidence that mysteriously disappeared. The board ruled in Stephanie's favor because there was no way to disprove her claims. Diane said the whole system was set up to protect people like Stephanie because the board was small and insular, and most of them were friends with her. She said the only way to win was to have ironclad evidence that could not be ignored or explained away. I spent the next 2 days organizing everything I had. I created a binder with printed copies of the porch camera footage, the gate log printout, the side-by-side complaint forms, Marcus's video, the voicemail transcript, and Diane's text messages. I also included a timeline showing every interaction I had with Stephanie, every fee she claimed I owed, and every threat she made. The attorney sent the cease and desist letter, and I got a copy of it for the binder. Then I filed a formal records request with the HOA, asking for all documentation related to my case, all gate logs, and all complaints filed by Stephanie in the past year. The request cost $50, which I paid by check so there would be a paper trail. A week later, I got a response. The HOA provided a partial gate log that did not include the night in question, a copy of one complaint form that looked nothing like the one Stephanie had given me, and a note saying the rest of the records were under review and would be available in 30 days. I forwarded the response to my attorney. He said the partial response was a violation of the state's HOA transparency laws and that we could file a motion to compel full disclosure. He also said the fact that they were stalling suggested they were trying to cover something up. He filed the motion that afternoon. The motion must have rattled someone, because 2 days later I got a call from the HOA board president. He said he wanted to meet in person to discuss the situation, and that he was willing to waive the fines if I agreed to drop the records request and the legal action. I said I was not interested in a deal unless the HOA cleared my name, provided a written apology, and took disciplinary action against Stephanie. He said that was not going to happen because Stephanie was a valued member of the team and had been with the association for years. I said then we had nothing to talk about and hung up. That night I got an email from an address I did not recognize. The subject line said evidence. Inside was a video file with no explanation. I opened it and saw footage from a security camera I did not recognize. The angle was weird, like it was mounted on a fence or a tree, and it showed the back entrance to the clubhouse storage area. The timestamp was from 3 weeks ago. Late at night. In the video, Stephanie unlocked the door, went inside, and came out a few minutes later carrying a toolkit case and a cardboard box. She loaded both into her car and drove off. The video was clear enough to identify her face and her license plate. I did not know who sent the video, but I was not going to question it. I saved 3 copies, uploaded one to a secure cloud account, and added the original to my evidence binder. Then I called my attorney and told him what I had. He said the video was a game changer and that it proved Stephanie had been stealing from the HOA and framing residents to cover her tracks. He said we needed to get the video to the management company and the board immediately, and that we should also consider filing a police report. I agreed and said I wanted to do it in person so I could see their reactions. The next morning I went to the management office. Diane was at the front desk, and when she saw me, she waved me in and locked the door behind me. She said Stephanie had been calling the office nonstop demanding updates on my case and threatening to sue the management company for failing to enforce the bylaws. Diane said the office manager was at the end of her rope and that if I had anything that could shut Stephanie down, now was the time. I opened my laptop and played the security camera video. Diane watched it twice and then said she needed to call the office manager and the legal team. She made the calls, and within 20 minutes the office was full of people. The office manager watched the video and said it was exactly what they needed. She said they had suspected Stephanie was behind a series of thefts over the past 6 months, but they did not have proof. She said residents had reported missing packages, petty cash disappearing from the clubhouse, supplies vanishing from storage, and tools going missing from maintenance carts. But every time they tried to investigate, Stephanie claimed she had already looked into it and found nothing. The office manager said Stephanie had been using her position to access areas other residents could not, and that she had been filing false complaints to deflect suspicion. She said the board had been too scared to confront her because she had dirt on everyone and knew how to weaponize the bylaws. If you are enjoying this story, please like and subscribe for more HOA nightmares and neighborhood drama. The legal team said the video was admissible and that they were going to forward it to the police along with a formal complaint. They also said they were going to recommend that the board terminate Stephanie's position immediately and revoke her access to all HOA property. The office manager asked if I wanted to be present when they confronted Stephanie. I said yes. She scheduled a meeting for that afternoon in the management office lobby and said she would make sure other residents were there to witness it. At 3 o'clock, the lobby was packed. Diane had quietly spread the word, and at least a dozen residents showed up, including Marcus. Stephanie arrived right on time, carrying her printer and her clipboard. She saw the crowd and smiled, assuming it was there to support her. The office manager stood up and said they needed to discuss some irregularities in the complaint process. Stephanie said she was happy to clarify anything and that she had been doing everything by the book. The office manager asked her to explain the security camera video. Stephanie's face went white. She asked what video. The office manager played it on a laptop facing the lobby so everyone could see. The room went silent. Stephanie watched for a few seconds and then said the video was fake and that someone had doctored it to frame her. The office manager said the timestamp and metadata had been verified and that the footage came from a camera Stephanie did not know existed. Stephanie said it did not matter because she had already submitted all the necessary documentation proving I was the thief. The office manager asked her to produce the documentation. Stephanie opened her bag and pulled out a stack of papers. The office manager took them and flipped through them. Then she held up 2 sheets and asked why they were identical. Stephanie said they were not identical. The office manager placed them side by side on the counter. They were the same template, same spacing, same typo. The office manager said Stephanie had been creating fake complaints using a homemade template and printing them on thermal paper to make them look official. She said a records request had uncovered the truth and that none of the complaints Stephanie filed in the past 6 months matched the official format. Stephanie tried to grab the papers. The office manager pulled them back and said Stephanie was not allowed to touch official documents. Stephanie said that was her line, that she was the one who enforced procedure. The office manager said not anymore. Then the office manager played my voicemail on speaker. The one Stephanie had claimed was a threat. The entire lobby heard it. There was no threat, no aggression, just a calm request for documentation. Someone in the crowd laughed. Stephanie's face turned red and she said the recording was out of context. The office manager said the context was clear and that Stephanie had been lying to residents, staff, and the board for months. She said the police had been notified and that Stephanie was being trespassed from the management office lobby effective immediately. Stephanie tried to argue. She said she had witnesses and that she could prove everything. The office manager asked her to name one witness. Stephanie said the contractor. The office manager said the contractor had already given a statement saying Stephanie tried to pressure him into lying. Stephanie said the deputy who took the report would back her up. The office manager said the deputy's report showed no evidence of harassment and that Stephanie had embellished the entire encounter. Stephanie said she had gate logs proving I was out at 2 a.m. The office manager pulled up the full gate log on her laptop and showed it to the room. My fob had not been used. Stephanie's fob had 3 separate exits and entries. The timeline matched the shadowy figure on my porch camera perfectly. Someone in the crowd asked if Stephanie had been stealing the whole time. The office manager said yes, and that the HOA was conducting a full audit of all missing items reported in the past year. She said early findings suggested Stephanie had been taking packages, supplies, and tools and then filing complaints against residents to cover her tracks. She said Stephanie had been running a theft ring and using her position to intimidate anyone who questioned her. The office manager said the board was meeting that evening to vote on Stephanie's termination, and that the results would be posted in the clubhouse by morning. Stephanie looked around the room. No one was on her side. She tried one more time to claim she was the victim, that I had orchestrated the whole thing to frame her. The office manager said the evidence was overwhelming and that Stephanie needed to leave immediately or the police would be called to remove her. Stephanie grabbed her bag and her printer and walked toward the door. On her way out, she turned and said, "You are lucky I am not harsher." Someone in the crowd said, "You already said that." And it did not work the first time either. Stephanie left. The office manager handed me a written correction clearing my name and confirming that no fines were owed. She said the HOA retracts the accusation in writing and clears the ledger. She also said the management company was filing a formal complaint with the state HOA oversight board, and that Stephanie would likely lose her credentials. She said the board was voting that evening to revoke Stephanie's access to all HOA systems and properties, and that she would never be allowed to serve in any HOA leadership role again. The office manager apologized for not acting sooner and said the system had failed me. I said I appreciated the apology, but that the real win was making sure Stephanie could not do this to anyone else. That night, the board voted unanimously to terminate Stephanie. The results were posted in the clubhouse the next morning, along with a notice that Stephanie Kessler gets trespassed from the management office lobby after a meltdown. The notice also said residents who had been accused of theft in the past 6 months were encouraged to file for refunds, and that the HOA would be conducting a full review of all complaints filed during Stephanie's tenure. Over the next 2 weeks, 8 residents came forward with similar stories. Every single one involved a missing item, a fake complaint form, and a threat of fines or access suspension. The HOA ended up refunding over $20,000 in bogus fees. The police report I filed turned into a full investigation. Detectives found a storage unit rented under Stephanie's name filled with stolen items, including the toolkit case that had been missing from the clubhouse, dozens of packages with shipping labels still attached, and boxes of supplies taken from the maintenance shed. Stephanie was charged with theft, fraud, and filing false police reports. The case is still working through the courts, but her attorney has already indicated she will plead guilty to avoid trial. A few weeks after everything wrapped up, I got another anonymous email. This one had a single line, "She tried to do it to me too, but I did not have proof. Thank you for finishing it. I do not know who sent it, but I saved it anyway." Marcus told me later that Stephanie used to brag about her enforcement record and that she kept a running tally of how many residents she had cited. He said she treated it like a game, and that the more complaints she filed, the more power she felt she had. He also said she had been trying to get him cited for parking violations for months, but could never make anything stick, because he always followed the rules. Marcus said watching her get escorted out of the management office was one of the most satisfying moments he had ever witnessed in the neighborhood. Diane retired a few months later. She told me she had been thinking about it for a while, but that dealing with Stephanie was the final push. She said working at the management office used to be straightforward, but once Stephanie took over gate coordination, everything became a battle. Diane said she spent half her time fielding complaints about Stephanie and the other half trying to clean up the messes Stephanie created. She said she was glad it was over and that she hoped the next person in the role would actually follow the rules. The HOA hired a new gate coordinator who implemented a transparent tracking system for all complaints and access issues. Residents can now log into a portal and see the status of any complaint filed against them, along with copies of all supporting documentation. The system also tracks who filed the complaint and when, which makes it much harder to create fake complaints or backdate submissions. The board also passed a new rule requiring all violation notices to be printed on official letterhead, with a unique reference number that can be verified in the portal. Thermal printouts are no longer accepted as official documentation. I still live in Harbor Point. The neighborhood is quieter now, and the enforcement patrols are less aggressive. People are not as scared to push back when something does not make sense, and the management company is more responsive when residents raise concerns. The clubhouse still has the same bulletin board where I found the gate log printout, but now it is updated weekly with real data instead of partial summaries. The bright orange cone Stephanie used to set on my porch step is gone. though I still see it sometimes in my mind every time I walk outside. The record's request that exposed contradictions and edits ended up being the key piece of evidence that unraveled everything. Without it, Stephanie would have kept stacking fake complaints and no one would have been able to prove the forms were fraudulent. The attorney told me later that most HOA disputes never get to the evidence phase because residents give up or settle early. He said the fact that I pushed through and gathered everything systematically made all the difference. He also said the security camera video was lucky, but that I had already built a strong enough case to win without it. The funny karma moment came about a month after the lobby confrontation. Someone posted a clip to the neighborhood Facebook group showing Stephanie carrying the stolen toolkit case out of the clubhouse storage area on the same night as the security camera footage. The clip was from a different angle, shot by a resident who had installed a trail camera to catch whoever was leaving trash near the dumpster. Stephanie had claimed she never touched the item and that I must have planted it in her storage unit to frame her. The clip proved she was lying. The post got hundreds of reactions and was shared across multiple HOA watch groups. Stephanie deleted all her social media accounts the next day. I keep the evidence binder in my office. Sometimes I flip through it to remind myself how close I came to losing my gate access, my parking rights, and possibly my job over a completely fabricated theft accusation. The binder has tabs for each category of evidence: camera footage, gate logs, complaint forms, witness statements, email records, and legal filings. It is more organized than any work project I have ever done, and it is a reminder that sometimes the only way to win against someone who weaponizes the rules is to follow the rules even more carefully than they do. The HOA consequence was exactly what I wanted: a full retraction, a cleared ledger, and a policy change that prevents this from happening to anyone else. The Karen consequence, Stephanie getting trespassed and charged, felt like justice but also like a warning. There are probably other Stephanies out there in other neighborhoods, printing fake notices and threatening residents with made-up fees. The only way to stop them is to document everything, demand transparency, and refuse to back down when something does not add up. Thanks for watching, and I will catch you in the next one.